July 30th, 1975, Detroit, Michigan. It's just another humid summer afternoon in America. At 2:45 p.m., Jimmy Hoffa, a man who once held the power to paralyze the nation's economy with a single phone call, steps out of his car. He smooths his jacket, glances around, and begins walking toward the Maffia's Red Fox restaurant. He believes he's going to a meeting that will decide his future. But history would decide otherwise. Because from this moment on, Jimmy Hoffa would never be seen alive again. His disappearance is more than just an unsolved crime. It's a shadow that still stretches across America, a story of power, betrayal, and silence. A mystery so dangerous that even after 5 decades, the truth remains buried, perhaps alongside Hoffa himself. Jimmy Hoffa's story begins far from Detroit's mob-controlled boardrooms. Born in 1913 to a poor family in Indiana, he learned early what it meant to struggle. By the time he was a teenager, he was already fighting for workers' rights, organizing laborers who had no voice. And in that fight, Hoffa discovered his talent, power. He could rally men like no one else. By the 1950s, Hoffa wasn't just leading truck drivers, he was leading an empire. The Teamsters union became the most powerful labor union in America, representing over 2 million workers. To the working man, Hoffa was a hero, the man who fought for better wages, health benefits, and dignity. But power attracts shadows. Behind the public victories, the Teamsters pension funds were quietly being used by organized crime families. Millions of dollars funneled into casinos, construction, and secret deals. Hoffa knew this. Some say he controlled it. Others say he was controlled by it, and that's where enemies began to gather. The Kennedy brothers, Robert and John, made Hoffa their target. Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General, publicly declared war on him, calling him corrupt, dangerous, and untouchable. Years of investigations finally sent Hoffa to prison in 1967 for bribery, fraud, and jury tampering. For most men, that would have been the end. But not for Hoffa. Even behind bars, his shadow stretched across America. He was still feared, still respected. And in 1971, when President Richard Nixon commuted his sentence, Hoffa was free again. But freedom came with a price. Nixon's deal banned Hoffa from engaging in union activities until 1980. For Hoffa, that was unacceptable. The union was his life, his empire, and he wanted it back now, even if that meant clashing with the very mob bosses who had grown rich in his absence. This was the decision that sealed his fate. Fast forward to July 30th, 1975. Hoffa leaves home that morning, telling his wife he has an important meeting with 2 men, Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone, third Detroit mobster, and Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano, a feared mafia boss from New Jersey. These weren't just casual acquaintances. They were former allies turned enemies. Hoffa believed they were coming to negotiate his return to power. What he didn't know was that he might be walking into a trap. At 2:30 p.m., Hoffa arrives at the Maffia's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township. Witnesses later report seeing him pacing in the parking lot, checking his watch, visibly irritated. By 2:45, he walks toward the entrance. By 3:30, Jimmy Hoffa is gone. His car remains in the lot. His body is never found. The FBI launches one of the largest investigations in its history. Hundreds of agents, thousands of leads, millions of dollars, and yet nothing. No body, no murder weapon, no crime scene, just silence. And here's where the story takes its first dark turn. What really happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Some believe he was killed by the Mafia. Hoffa had challenged their control of the Teamsters, and the Mafia doesn't tolerate threats. According to one mob informant, Hoffa was lured into a car, strangled, and his body cremated in a Detroit funeral home. Another rumor claims he was buried beneath Giants Stadium in New Jersey, entombed in concrete, while construction crews worked overhead. But when the stadium was demolished in 2010, no trace of Hoffa was ever found. Others suggest something even darker, that the US government knew far more than it admitted. Hoffa wasn't just a union boss. He was a man with secrets. Secrets about political deals, money laundering, even alleged CIA operations involving organized crime. Could his disappearance have been convenient? Was Hoffa silenced to keep those secrets buried? And then comes the strangest theory of all, that Hoffa staged his own vanishing act. Tired of pressure from the Mafia, the FBI, and even his own allies, Some believe he orchestrated his disappearance, slipping away into a new identity. In 1975, it was easier to vanish. No cell phones, no surveillance cameras. Just one man walking into the shadows, but every theory raises more questions than answers. And this is where I need you to pause and think. If you've been pulled into this story, if you're as curious about these shadows as we are, subscribe now. Because here on Forgotten Shadows, we dive deeper into the mysteries history can't solve. And trust me, what comes next in Hoffa's story is even more unbelievable. After Hoffa's disappearance, the FBI went all in. They tapped phones, raided homes, and interviewed hundreds of witnesses. They searched Michigan fields, marshes, even landfills. At one point, a tip led them to a suburban backyard where they believed Hoffa's remains might be buried. They dug. They found nothing. Another lead suggested Hoffa was ground up in a steel drum and buried in a marsh near Detroit. The FBI sent divers. Again, nothing. Over time, the investigation itself became almost as legendary as the man who vanished. The FBI called it Hoffex, and for decades, every new informant, every new mob defector was asked the same question: what happened to Hoffa? Some claimed he was beaten to death. Others swore he was incinerated. Each story contradicted the last. And yet here's the strange truth. For all the rumors, for all the digging, not a single piece of physical evidence has ever been found. No blood, no clothing, no bones, nothing. So what does this mean? Maybe the Mafia covered their tracks so well that nothing survived. Maybe the government really did suppress the truth, or maybe Hoffa's final secret is still out there, waiting to be uncovered. What we do know is that his disappearance changed America. Without Hoffa, the Teamsters fell further into Mafia hands. Billions in pension money flowed into secret projects, casinos, even international ventures. The man who once controlled the lifeline of America's economy was gone, and the shadows quickly swallowed what he left behind. Nearly 50 years later, the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa is more than just an unsolved crime. It's a mirror of power, corruption, and silence. A story with no ending, because the ending itself was erased.
Over the years, countless claims have surfaced. Some said Hoffa was buried under stadium concrete. Others swore his remains were hidden in farmland or landfills. Each time the FBI dug, investigated, and searched, and yet every lead ended in nothing. Despite decades of rumors and headlines claiming his body was finally found, the official truth remains unchanged. Jimmy Hoffa's remains have never been discovered.
So what do you believe? Was Hoffa strangled by the Mafia, buried in concrete and erased forever? Was he silenced by the government to protect dangerous secrets? Or did he slip away, starting a new life in a place where no one would ever find him? Perhaps the truth died with those who carried it. Or perhaps it still lies waiting somewhere in the shadows of Detroit, and that is the forgotten shadow of Jimmy Hoffa.